to the rest of the story. 2 Corinthians chapter 10. We're going to pick up where we began this morning. Kind of give you an idea of the map that I have so far from the Lord. We have chapters 11, 12, and 13 to go through in 2 Corinthians. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to, on Sunday morning, I'm going to break away from going through 2 Corinthians, and we'll use that for Sunday night and Wednesday nights to finish out what little's going to be left. On Sunday mornings over the next 6 weeks, I want to talk about our journey with God. Our salvation, baptism, being a part of His church family, our service to the Lord, our growing in Jesus Christ, and the last subject will be going home to heaven. So I want to take our journey with God and take it on Sunday morning. The Lord has blessed us with new faces, and I don't know about you, but I'm happy with those new faces. Amen. And we have some young kids coming on that are at the age of accountability, and I think it's important to address those issues with them. My expectation is that in the next few months we'll be baptizing some more. I am not bragging, but I think Sabrina's probably the 16th person we've been privileged to baptize with in less than the last year. Amen? Amen. And most all of them have been adults outside of Holden and Madison, yeah. Those are the two youngest. I don't know about you guys, but we're blessed. You understand? I've talked to several pastors around here, and they hadn't baptized one in months. So God has blessed us in a whole lot of ways, and that's a special one. And again, Sabrina, on behalf of our church, what a blessing. Glad to have you guys. All right. So 2 Corinthians chapter 10. I want to take it a little bit at a time, okay? So Paul begins in chapter 10, this dynamic turnaround from where he has been throughout this book of 2 Corinthians. He brings us in verses 1 through 6 to where he begins his disarming of the critics. Even though Paul has sent now a third letter their way for them to see and understand and know what God's message is for them from the apostle. One of those letters was pretty scathing, to say the least. We don't even have it, but undoubtedly it stirred up a stink. There's somebody in the church at Corinth, all we know him as is brother so-and-so, because he is never mentioned, but he is leading this group of critics against Paul. And they have letters in hand and recommendations to get rid of the apostle. And Paul addressed this morning the fact that he's coming, and he's either going to come with an olive branch or he's going to come in the power of an apostle to where he can shape their world. He's coming in the same manner, and I forgot this, what happened when I get away from my sermon notes, but Moses, when he was faced with the three characters that stood up against him, and he called upon an earthquake to open up and swallow those three, and their tents and all their possessions, then he made this bold question: who is on the Lord's side? And that's really where Paul's coming from here as you come to chapter 10. He says, let's cut to the chase. I am coming to find out who is on the Lord's side. And he has identified himself as apostle of Jesus Christ. He's identified himself as one that's walking in the Spirit of God. He's identified himself as one with Jesus Christ. It's not anything in his life that is according to the flesh as they would accuse him to be. He is the same Paul writing to them as he is the Paul they're going to come face to face with. And the critics are going to have to face this man that they have been grumbling and complaining about. So as he comes to this section, look at verse 7. He says, do you look at things according to the outward appearance? If anyone is convinced in begins to talk about what these critics are up to. It's what they're doing. And he says, you make the same mistake that people have always made. You're looking at the outward form. You remember me when I was face to face with you and you saw me in my physical body. You look at me in the same way that they looked at Jesus Christ. And humanity tends to want to look at people and what they see for face value. That's how they make their assumption. That, well, because he looks that way, guess what? He must be that. You know, one of the saddest things where I've seen this happen, where we look at a person and what we see outwardly, we either underestimate or overestimate who that person is in the area of marriage. I don't know how many times I have hugged, prayed over a husband or a wife that 2 or 3 years after they got married, and they would say, well, I didn't know they were like that. Everything on the outside looked good. But then, the inside revealed itself. Well, the prophet Samuel could easily have made that same mistake by underestimating, or in his case, overestimating, who God wanted to be the next king of the nation of Israel. Because you remember when the prophet Samuel was sent by God to choose the next king, he sent him to a certain household. Remember? Whose was it? Huh? Well, it wasn't David's household. David was a little shepherd boy. What was his dad's name?
Jesse.
Thank you. Speak louder, you know. You get an extra minute. I don't have any. I was baptized and I didn't want to get them all wet like I was washing. You ought to see my clothes on Monday morning. All those men. But you understand that when the prophet Samuel came and he was going to choose the next king for the nation of Israel, he looked at these boys, and the very first son that he saw was this strapping, bulked up, handsome, good-looking guy named Eliab. And guess what? He said, that is the next king for the children of Israel. And guess what? Right before he anoints him, the Spirit of God speaks into his heart and says, no. So he walks to the next son. No, 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 no. And he's like, well, what in the world do I do, God? You turned them all down. And he looks at Jesse and says, you got any more kids? And he said, yeah, I got a run of a boy out there. What's he doing? He's taking care of the sheep. Go get him. I'm going to tell you something. When he looked at David, he did not see one quality in that young man that stood out as the quality that a king ought to be. He underestimated the outward appearance. Guess what? You flip that around. God knew who the next king of Israel needed to be. God already had his hand on that boy's heart. Because let me tell you what happens. It's not long till they go to this valley of Elam, and guess what? There's a giant over there on the other side of the valley named Goliath that's 8 foot tall, and he's got a spear and a sword, and he goes out every morning and he curses the name of Israel's God. And I'm going to tell you something. Those boys, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah, those 3 boys that should have been chosen by earthly standards to be the next king, they weren't worth a flip when it came to facing that giant. In fact, when David comes to the camp with food for his brothers and to check on them by his father's direction, he says, what in the world is going on? Why are y'all over here hiding from that giant? Why don't somebody go whoop him? So they bring him to the king. King says, here's my armor. Here's my sword. Well, let me tell you something, folks. David was a lot smarter than King Saul and his brothers. Because David said, thank you. my Lord. Let me tell you something. David did not need carnal weapons to fight a giant. You remember this morning? We think this battle is a carnal battle. It's a physical battle. It's not. Most of the time, it's a spiritual battle that we're up against. And the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They're spiritual. So let me tell you what. He goes over there. He stops at the brook. Well, he has his slingshot with him. He grabs some smooth stones. One for that Philistine and one, I think in God's wisdom, if you read the rest of the story, his 4 ugly brothers that were giants. He had so much faith, he said, I'm going to kill every giant in the land. That's what I believe. Anyway, he goes running at Goliath. And Goliath's standing there with this big old spear. And he's standing there with his sword. And David said, you better look out. I'm coming at you in the name of my Lord. And he could have slung that stone 180 degrees that way. But it wasn't David's shot that put that stone right there. God could have taken that around the earth 3 times and still buried it in the head of that Goliath. You know why? Because he was God's choice. God knew that day would come, and none of those boys were going to be giant killers. God needed a giant killer. And you know what? Samuel looked at those boys and said, it's got to be one of these. And he looked at that kid and he said, that ain't nothing but a punk kid. What can he do? Well, let me tell you something. He underestimated what God could do. The king underestimated what God could do. But I'm going to tell you this. The Bible clearly says that the Holy Spirit of God spoke into the heart of Samuel the prophet and said, Samuel, listen to me, boy. I don't look at the outward appearance of a man, the countenance, his height, his build. I look at his heart. Amen. I look at his heart. And God knew the heart that beat inside that boy. So let me tell you something. The first mistake these critics made was the fact that they were underestimating who the Apostle Paul was. They were looking on the outside. The outside. I love it. I got to keep going. I've already preached halfway through my sermon. Goodness, how did that happen? Latter part of verse 7. Notice what he said. Let him again consider this in himself, that just as he is Christ, even so we are Christ. They were looking at the outward, and guess what? They left out the inward. He said, you guys say that you're following Jesus Christ. Let me tell you something. I know I'm following Christ. I know that I am following Christ. He said, I belong to Jesus Christ. If anybody here can claim who is Christ, it's me. Ever who was leading that group of critics at Corinth must have been boasting about their knowledge. They must have been boasting about their experience. And I'll guarantee you they were probably boasting about their long tenure as being a member of that church. And more than once in my life I've heard people say, well, I've been a member here since. And guess what? They think tenure matters with God. Let me tell you something. Tenure does not matter with God. I want to ask you a question. I never asked you this question. Oh, is that Tyler? Tyler, is that you? You've been trophies because this sure sounded like her. Or you want to be a part of our church family? Be your baptism. So this would be our newest member. Okay? You know what? She is much both. Who's her? Sally! Look back there. See that girl? That's our longest tenured member. Right, Sally? You're at the top now. You got to hang with us for a while now. Okay? But you know what? Her vote counts 100%. And your vote counts 100%. It's not about tenure. It's not like, well, I've earned this. But ever who this character was, he was telling them, hey, let me tell you something. I know more than this apostle. I'm smarter than that man. I've been at this church a lot longer than he has. But let me tell you something. Paul belonged to Jesus Christ. And he was going to prove brother so-and-so at the fact. Notice in verse 8. Even if I should boast somewhat more about our authority. He's an apostle. He had that power, which the Lord gave us for edification and not for your destruction. I shall not be ashamed. So God didn't give Paul this apostolic power for Paul to just go around and zapping all of the faith. Thank goodness. I've always thought if he did that for me as a pastor, it would be a sad world. Because I'd be zapping the wrong people. And probably need to zap myself first. Right? But let me tell you something. Nobody said right. Right? Right. Thank you. Paul's boasting was in him. It wasn't in his apostleship. It wasn't in the authority that he had. It wasn't in the knowledge that he possessed. Paul's boasting was in Jesus Christ in him. Who he was in Jesus Christ. He wasn't going to boast or even abuse the power that he possessed. And notice what he says in verse 9, lest I seem to terrify you by letters. So here they are. And Paul seems to think that for some reason they feel terror coming on. Somebody is feeling afraid because he says, I'm coming. And you can either have an olive branch or you can have the power that I come with as an apostle. So here they were afraid, fearful. He said, listen, I didn't write these letters to cause you to be fearful of me. These letters were not to bring terror. They were to deal with the fact that he is going to take care of these critics face to face. And then there's what they were saying in verses 10 and 11. For his letters, they say, are weighty and powerful, but his bodily presence is weak and his speech contemptible. Let such a person consider this, that what we are in word by letters, when we are absent, such will we also be indeed when we are present. Now he goes back and he's redundant because he's saying the same thing he said this morning. Let me tell you something. He says, I'm the same person whether I'm writing you a letter or I'm in your face because you have been lying that I was humble and meek around you, and then when I write letters, I'm bold and brash and terrifying in what I write to you. And Paul says, let me tell you something. That is wrong. They were saying his letters, his writings were weighty. They were severe. They were oppressive. Powerful, strong words. And let me tell you something. Anytime you use strong words, guess what? Feelings are going to be hurt. It is. They're going to be hurt. They said, your appearance is weak. Better translated, oh, you're ugly, man. Imagine how you would look if you had gone through beatings. Imagine how you would look after all the persecution that he had been through in all of these cities. Imagine how you would look after you were stoned and left for dead. And you survived. Imagine the wear and tear on your face. You know what? When I look at every president that I can remember outside of President Kennedy, I remember him. But he died young. But the other presidents that served that I can remember and watch them in their 6 years or 4 years or 8 years, let me tell you something. They're old men. President Obama went in there and, he was a healthy, I didn't know he smoked, but he was healthy You need to tone it down. The way you look is not very attractive. You need to use makeup. And then they come around and say, your preaching's contemptible. You're slanderous in the way that you preach. So here's your pastor. He writes too severe, he's ugly, and his appearance is wrong. In other words, he probably wasn't wearing bow ties. And he preaches slanderous sermons. Who wants a pastor like that? Who wants an ugly, loud, abrasive, bow tie preacher? Not bow tie preacher. Yeah. You understand? That's his critics that he's answering here. That's his critics. So he responds to them. And he begins his response in verse 12. For we dare not class ourselves or compare ourselves with those who commend themselves. But they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. We, however, will not boast beyond measure, but within the limits of the sphere which God has appointed us, a sphere which especially includes you. And we are not overextending ourselves as though our authority did not extend to you, for it was to you that we came with the gospel of Jesus Christ. I love it. He ridiculed them. First, because they're using the wrong measuring rod. And he tells them, your measuring rod is a whole lot further away than my measuring rod. Whatever club this is that you're belonging in with brother so-and-so, you can count me out. Because while you may be in the club of the arrogant and the proud, I'm in club Jesus. Amen. And then he says, I will not enjoy your mistaken results. What you measure your success by and what I measure my success by are not the same. And I'm going to tell you something, folks, that numbers game has always bothered me. How we want to equate ministry by numbers. Don't get me wrong. I like the numbers. I like it on Sunday night when there's 50-something people. I like it on Sunday morning when we're bumping 100. Hey, I like it when we're baptizing. I do. I like it. Amen. I love it. Amen. What did I say? I want some more of it. Who said that? I want some more of it. That's it. I do. That was from this morning. Sorry. But it's the board on the wall that people look at. I used to see it all the time. I'm glad ours is here. People don't see it. But people walk in and they would look. They come out of Sunday school class and sit down and they look on the wall and they say, oh man, we only had 85 days before we're back. Really? Is it the board on the wall or is it the road in heaven that God is concerned about? Is it the amount of the crowd that matters or the quality of the people that are being ministered to and the growth that they're experiencing? Remember that Sunday school lesson from this morning? That's a good one. Why would this preaching deacon, Philip, leave the city and the crowds that he was having these evangelistic meetings with and go out into the middle of the desert to a wandering soul? Number one, he's from Ethiopia, which you're correct. It's not Africa. But he's a eunuch. I mean, who in the world would leave the big church to go to one soul out in the middle of the desert? Well, I want to tell you something. That preaching deacon Philip did. You know why? Because the Spirit of God led him there. Because I want to tell you something. It's just like God with Samuel the prophet. God looked at the heart of a young, ruddy old boy named David, and God knew his heart was big enough to lead a nation for 40 years. And let me tell you something. He wasn't perfect. But his heart was still good. You remember that. I make mistakes. But I hope you understand my heart's good. You understand that? I hope you understand that. I make mistakes, but my heart's good. But let me tell you something about Philip. Philip went there because him reading the prophet Isaiah. And he stops his journey and he preaches to him who he's reading about in Isaiah. Jesus. And that eunuch accepts Christ. Woo-hoo. One. Think of the thousands that was going on back in the city. No, you don't understand. God wasn't looking at that eunuch. God was looking at a country that needed Jesus. That eunuch was headed back to. Do you understand? 1 plus 1 could equal 1,000 by God's standards. The measuring rod is totally different. Let me ask you a real pointed question. What if the one person that you were to lead to Jesus Christ became the next Apostle Paul? What if the next kid that you minister to and love on, what if the next child in that nursery that you set aside to help and work on and nurture and love grows up to be the next Billy Graham? What if the next young person that comes to this church becomes the next D. James Kennedy? How many of you know who D. James Kennedy is? That is amazing. Let me tell you something about him. He taught me how to really do evangelism. It was called Evangelism Explosion. Way back a long time ago, probably in the 80s, I went to First Baptist Fort Smith. D. James Kennedy pastored, get this, Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A gospel-preaching Presbyterian pastor.
Wow.
And God, in 3 years, I believe it was, that church grew from over 100 to about 20. And he got away and he talked to God. What's going on here? And God stirred his heart for a way to tell people about Jesus. So he went back to the 20 and he trained them how to share effectively the gospel of Jesus Christ. 20 years later, there are 20,000 people. But I'll tell you something different. 20 years later, when I meet this man at the Florida Baptist Convention Evangelism Conference, we sit down and talk. I asked him, I said, did you ever think when you went from 100-something to 20 to survive? Did you ever think when God gave you a way to teach your people how to share the gospel that there would be over 100,000 trained people that are gospel sharers now? Would you ever believe that, who knows how many hundreds of thousands of people have come to Christ because of D. James Kennedy being obedient to God? Let me tell you something, fellas. We look on the outward, we forget about the inward. We sometimes just do not see what God has done. Does that make sense? You're staring me down like I'm a lollipop that you're ready to either lick or break. I can't determine what it is. Keep an eye on it, will you? 3 things Paul shares with us as I close, 14 and 15. For we are not overextending ourselves as though our authority did not extend to you, for it was you that we came with the gospel of Christ. Do you understand? Any of those people in the church at Corinth that were legitimately saved, they were saved because Paul preached the gospel. They were his spiritual children. And then he says this, not boasting of things beyond our measure, that is in other men's labor, not what others have done, but having hope that as your faith is increased, we shall be greatly enlarged by you in our sphere, to preach the gospel in the regions beyond you and not to boast in another man's sphere of accomplishment. For he who glories, let him glory in the Lord. For not he who commends himself is approved, but whom the Lord commends. 3 things. And church, this is for us. 3 rules that Paul says are important for ministry. Number 1, we cultivate our own field. Okay? We cultivate think about it, from Antioch in the west to Corinth in the east, there was a trail of people that knew Jesus Christ because they were the seed of Paul. There were churches all over that area. From those two places, far and wide, that were there because of the Apostle Paul. We do not cultivate the fields of others. We cultivate our own field. Every one of those churches were filled with new converts, his children. That's important. The second thing is contemplate your own fruit. Paul was not in proselytizing. You know what that means? Paul wasn't in to going over here and getting this church member from that church and bringing them here. That was not it. And do you realize, listen, in 2017, 90%, and most churches are dying. Okay, let me just preface it. Most churches in America, evangelical churches, have plateaued and decreasing. Now, I don't know about you, but when I start decreasing, that means I'm either losing weight or I'm dying. Okay? They're losing weight. They're dying. 90% of the growth that we experience in the American church today is somebody leaving here and going over there. Transitional growth, that's the word I'm looking for. So people move from one place to another. Okay? That happens. Now there's a lot of variables there. People move to a community. Guess what? That's fine. Sadly, sometimes people get mad and just up and leave the church. And the worst thing in the world we can do is take them in. Well, I want to tell you something. It's been my experience. Most people get mad at that preacher or that person. They're going to find that same person here because I'm going to tell you something. We're all still that same lump of clay. And there ain't nobody perfect here. No, you ain't. But you understand what I'm saying? We cultivate our own field and we also contemplate our own fruit. The worst form of church growth is when you take a member from somewhere else. Now, if God chooses to bring someone our way, we'll take them. But we aren't about stealing folks from anywhere else. And the third principle is this: consecrate your own flock. I love this. My responsibility, our responsibility, is to grow up and nurture this church family. You know, from Bible school, God's already given us another half a dozen folks to work with. You know that? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that good? Huh? Who said this? Oh, I'm sorry. He didn't mean to too. That sounds just like me. So, all final words in mine too. Expand the ministry. That's what he says in verse 16. Preach the gospel in the regions beyond. We have a responsibility to not only make sure the gospel's here, but the gospel's everywhere else that we can help it be. Amen? Amen? And in order to do that, there's got to be more of us involved to make that happen. We need everyone on board. Second thing he says is we must exalt the Lord. If we're going to glory, we're not going to glory in 16. We're going to glory in the fact that God gave us 16. Well, the praise goes to the Lord Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. See, Sabrina, I don't think... did you see that? It was an answer for us to sit down at the table and talk. Was that important? I don't think that was me. I think that was God's divine performance. And God has more for us. He does. But it's not about us. Let us glory in Him. And then the last thing is we're not he who commends himself as approved, we do our part.